On today's episode, I sit down with Steve Simonson. Steve is one of the most humble, passionate, and motivated people I've come across. To quote him sort of indirectly, he calls a startup anything up to about $50 million, just to give you some insights into the magnitude of what this incredible guy has achieved in his life and in business. He talks about his philosophy, how management plays a key role in getting the right people on board and steering the ship, and how important culture is into building a business and everything in between. He tells some incredible stories about the things that didn't go so great for him and the learnings he took from it, and his humility, his investment into entrepreneurs, and always having time to sit down with people like me is just amazing. Have a listen, see what you think. I'm sure, like me, you'll learn a few things. Hi, and welcome to Successful Scales, the show where I interview now successful professionals about their journey and try and garner insights onto any tips that can be applied to your business at home. Whether it's financial freedom or the exit of your company, wherever your journey may take you, the idea here is to simply learn from those who have done it before. I hope you enjoy and you get some value out of this. Buckle up and enjoy the episode. Steve, thank you so much for taking the time and coming on Successful Scales.
Thrilled to be here.
Yeah, no, it's I've been looking forward to this and excited to hear some of your wisdom. So obviously, I know I've seen the size of your email. I know how many companies approximately you have at any one time, but I would love for you just to maybe tell a little bit about yourself so that people listening at home can get an understanding of kind of who you are.
Yeah, so I consider myself kind of a lifetime entrepreneur. I started my first business in 1988 when I was 18 years old, which makes me relatively old today. Now I'm 50 years old, and I really have never had a proper job. And so, when I say that, before 18, I had some jobs as cooks and janitors and so forth. But by the time I was 18, I started my first business, and then I've really just kind of doubled down along the way. My first business went into my second, went into my third, and along the way, I learned a few things. So I tend, for the last 20 years, to specialize in e-commerce, brand building, and those types of endeavors. And so, I just consider myself an entrepreneur and somebody who's learned some lessons, and I've made a ton of mistakes and made a ton of kind of lucky guesses along the way. And at the end of the day, we call that experience. We rebrand it. We're marketers. That's what we do.
Love it. Love it. Yeah, I'm sitting here thinking to myself, we were talking before about the book Good to Great, and all I'm thinking about is level 5 leadership. And so like that in itself, not taking credit for some of the incredible things that you've achieved is very characteristic.
Well, it is, first of all, I do love the book Good to Great. That was very formative for me. I suppose I probably was listening to it in the 90s or thereabouts. And I'm a big learner at heart. By the way, I hate school. Like, I dropped out of college first semester. I hate school, but I love to learn, right? And it's this dichotomy of how can you hate college and hate being in a structured learning environment, but so thirsty you just cannot stop learning, right? So books and now podcasts and all the world we live in is just like input, right? The Johnny Five robot reference for those 80s kids. So I think of all of my stuff as I've had some lucky breaks, and I personally have made a ton of mistakes. The team largely has performed to produce all of the extraordinary things we've seen, and that's okay, right? I kind of want it like that. I prefer to just be able to disappear if I can, and that's when I know I've got things going in the best direction. When I can just disappear for 10 days, 30 days, and I don't tell anybody, and I'm just gone. And they might check in and say, hey, what about this? And I go, I'll get it when I'm back. And they're like, oh, I didn't even know you were gone, right? That's a good vibe to have when you have lots of, I would say, things ongoing and running at the same time.
Well, that's a great insight into what is one of the key skills, right? It's creating that infrastructure or that system to actually enable you to live that life. I'd love to dig in there because it sounds like It's not the first time that you've done it. And, we were chatting as well. You were just in Mexico, back and forth. What does it actually take for you to get to that? Like when you're kind of trying to deconstruct how you create that reality, what does that look like for you?
Well, it starts with the idea that for me, I understand that my business is a tool, right? A lot of people, especially when you start your first business, and I have to say this was an evolution for me as well. We treat the business like a little baby, right? And oh, hey, the baby got a sale, right? It's getting up on its legs and walking, and we think it's so cute. And oh no, it fell down. We had a bad day or weekend sales, right? And we're just emotionally so involved with this thing. And it's not that you don't feel great if things aren't going great, right? And you always feel better when things are going great. Um, but at the end of the day, it's not anything other than a financial tool. And if it's not doing the financial job, then it needs to be, shot and taken out in the back and buried, right? Clearly not a baby, right? So it's a financial instrument. Right? You like that analogy? Yeah, you have to up the NC-17 rating on this baby. But the point is, if you treat it like a business and a financial instrument, you hold it accountable based on metrics and numbers and things like that. And each person you bring on, they are responsible for those things. And that's the key thing. I remember I was at a trade show one time, and I was the CEO of this up and coming startup. And so this big company is trying to put on a show and say that, we should do business with them. And each of their people came forward and introduced themselves. And there's, hi, I'm Bob. I'm responsible for ABC. And then, hi, I'm Janet. I'm responsible for ABC. And I was like, wait a minute. This is very interesting. They didn't say I'm the vice president of this or that. They said I'm responsible for these things. And understanding that when you hire a team, you're moving the responsibility from yourself into these various functional allies in the battle. That was a huge, huge thing for me. Responsibility comes accountability, right? So we can't forget that. You can't just say you're responsible and abdicate it. The old method of management that entrepreneurs are so good at. We make them responsible and accountable, and then we measure that in an objective and truthful way. I always blame the system if I can, and never the people. And the exceptions are, we have one example where we had some retail stores, and we watched on our cameras as the manager coded in his code, went in and stole all the money out of the safe, and went off on a drug binge. I didn't blame the system that time. I blamed the guy, and the guy went to jail and so on and so forth. But in general, the system runs the business, the people run the system. And if there's a fail, let's look at the system first and hold management accountable. And then if we know that the system's working, then we do have to look at personal issues along the way, or personnel issues in that case.
It's great insights. I want to unpack a few of them. So do you have a process that exists around, you talked about responsible, accountable. I'm going to pronounce this wrong. I don't know which way to, is it a RACI or Reiki matrix?
RACI. You got me.
Do you know responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed? The matrix on how you kind of, delegate when projects are delivered?
I haven't heard of that one. No.
Well, there you go. And I'm probably butchering the insights on how that actually works. Something that we practice internally as well. And that's a key, I would say, to kind of success is exactly what you're pointing out there. So what's your approach on actually, how do you get the person to buy in, to be accountable and responsible on that delivery?
Well, we start with culture matching. Right. So we do believe that culture matters. Now, I know there's a lot of entrepreneurs, especially in this, work from home and distributed workforce world that we live in. And they've just said, well, we're not in an office, therefore we have no culture. And I'm here to say you got a culture either way, right? Whatever you have an absence of culture, you have a toxic culture, you have a dismissive culture, but you got a culture one way or the other. So you either take ownership, or the vacuum that is humans will fill in the blanks with the worst story, right? I cannot tell you how many times as leadership we learned the lesson of not communicating and, either making some sort of Maybe we acquired a company or we fired a key person. And then if we didn't communicate, we didn't allow our team to know what was on our mind, right? So they just filled in the blanks. And that makes a very negative cultural situation, right? So we start with culture and we hire a culture first, skills second. Skills then, you don't hire an airline pilot who doesn't have skills, right? But you should hire an airline pilot that meets your culture, and those things both have to work together. In our case, we will hire, high caliber people, but we really do want culture to matter to them. And we don't say, does culture matter to you? And they say, yes, it does. And we say, you're hired, right? We say, here's what we believe. And we just list a bunch of things that we believe. And we get a sense from them what they believe over the course of time. And then from that point, so culture comes first. Then we say, here's your mission. We're here to change the world. Are you ready to go take that hill? Here's what that looks like. The work responsibilities, the time it's going to take to do it. Do you buy into all this? We really think that management at its best is like selling, right? You're selling a product. Will you take this responsibility, charge that hill, and do whatever it takes to do it? And people want to do it. They want to accomplish things. People's innate sense of fulfillment largely comes from their accomplishments. And so to be able to let them put them in a position to win and then let them take that hill, then the best currency in the world is recognition. We found, recognize them, give them a chance to be publicly noted within the company. That again makes the culture happier and happier along the way.
Love it. It's so cool for me to be sitting here. Like I've probably recorded maybe 20 or so episodes so far, and just to kind of hear the same things coming up time and time again about the culture and the people, and it's the people that drive, the, like you defined it as the financial vehicle forward, but it's so that the sum is greater than the parts, and how do you actually get everyone sort of driving in that one direction? So yeah, fantastic insights.
It's not always easy. I mean, the truth is, I do not like most of this stuff. I'm not good at most of this stuff. And so it's a skills thing, it's not built into me.
Hmm.
But I know based on when we've done it right and when we've done it wrong, that it's way easier to do it right. Right. So I have to work harder to make everybody else's life easier. So having an all hands meeting, like I have no desire to hold an all hands meeting. I personally couldn't care less what I have to say about any topic, anywhere, at any time. Yet I know that if I go out and I say, so next Monday or Tuesday, whatever the first is, we're going to have an all hands meeting, and we literally try to get everybody we have around the globe on the same call. And I say, here's what's happening this quarter. Here's what's happening. Here's where we accomplished things last quarter. Here's where you fit in. I can't talk to each person individually in that call, but your role, your job helps us accomplish this thing. That's just part of it. And I don't like to do it. I don't dislike it per se. It's just like, I would rather take a nap or do something else, but
Yeah.
it's important. So you got to do it.
But would you say that something like that is, it sounds to me like it's something that is really in your wheelhouse of things that you are uniquely good at. So, I think,
Yeah, I guess. I don't know. People tell me that. I personally don't see it, but I come off a call or just out of a meeting, and whatever, and people are like, I'm really excited. I'm really jazzed up. I'm like, yeah, well, cool story, bro. I don't know why, but I'm just saying, here's where we're going. Let's, we feel a sense of urgency. We feel a sense of, wouldn't it be cool if we got this to happen? That is something that I understand the vision, and I have the strength, you can put that in quotes, of self-assurance. So even if I'm wrong, I think I'm right, and I can almost always convince everyone else I'm right. So that means we're all going up that hill. Whether or not it's a cliff or not remains to be seen. But there have been plenty of hills that we celebrated, and other cliffs we fell off together, and c'est la vie. I can't get it all right.
and I think that's also a big part of it, right? Is that wow, this is just such a powerful book, Good to Great, but just the notion of having the right people on the bus. It doesn't really matter what that end outcome looks like. You're enjoying that journey each step of the way with the people who matter most, outside of your family and whatnot. But these are the people you're spending most of your waking hours with. So yeah.
It makes it easier. That's for sure.
Wow. So you really are someone who started a lot of different businesses, and you've had a ton of experience, the goods, the bads, and everything in between. When you're sort of stepping into a new business, or like, I know that you have a PPE business, if I'm not mistaken. I know you see opportunities, but what's the thing that like uniquely drives you to go again and start the next one?
Stupidity. I'll put stupidity at the top. Um, well, I could tell you this. I'd like to be excited about the concept of building something, and that the unique challenges with each concept or business are part of what excites me. Right? It's like, well, maybe nobody else can do this, or it's a fool's errand, but here's why I think I can do it. And why I could be totally wrong. By the way, I told you about self assurance; it can just lead you down the path.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, that PPE business, I'm going to lose a ton of money on, and lick
Sorry.
my wounds. So I appreciate you bringing that up. No, I'm just kidding. No, but that's actually a classic lesson in, just because I want to do it doesn't mean I should do it. So let's start there. So, entrepreneurs have shiny object syndrome, but I can tell you personally that I tried to quote unquote retire back in 20. I don't remember the exact time. Let's say 2010 or 2012. I'm not sure exactly the time, but I had one main business that it was somebody else was running it, and the team was responsible for it. I was a chairman of the board for a company in Europe and a CEO for a company in China. And I just said, I'm going to just step away from those responsibilities day to day, and I'm just going to go travel and do whatever I want. Right. And I can just tell you, I was miserable. I absolutely was miserable. It was one of the, now, by the way, I went on multiple cruises, beach vacations. I went on so many vacations. My kids were tired of being on vacation. They literally were like complaining at the end, Dad, we just want to stay in the room, watch YouTube. And I'm yelling at them to put on their bathing suit and go look at the dolphins. Right. And this is it's a
Terrible.
weird, I
You're
know
you're
this is,
terrible.
I am a tyrant. That's for sure.
Yeah.
So the point though is we had, at that point, we had been on vacation for like 6 weeks. Of course, they just want to sit in and be kids and watch YouTube and do whatever kids do. So my point is that I tried to not do anything, and it was a nightmare. So now I try to be judicious, but I have to do something. There is no retirement for me. My brain is not built like that. And so I have to do stuff. And I want to do stuff that I think has a network effect, in other words, has the ability to help lots of entrepreneurs primarily. And over time, I'm doing less and less kind of D2C or B2B kind of businesses, although there's some that remain that are reasonable size, and I'll exit those at some point soon. But I really just want to focus. That's my version of retirement, is just focusing on businesses that have some sort of network effect to entrepreneurs, because those are my people. That's my tribe. I just want to have fun and hang out with entrepreneurs around the world in various places. That's my version of retirement. And so when I evaluate new things, I'm like, does this have that kind of network effect? Does the challenge excite me? It's almost impossible to do it, right? Because that's kind of where I like to play.
No, that makes sense. You mentioned that it gets to a point, and you decide to exit. Is there a particular stage of that journey? It sounds like you're very excited about the actual entrepreneurial journey and supporting many entrepreneurs. Is it that starting point that's exciting? Is it building, like, is it completing the perfect system and saying, right, my work here is done? Like, what is it that is sort of your driving light there?
Yeah, it's evolved over time. So I can tell you, having had companies where I was 100% responsible for it. So I break it down based on what are my day-to-day responsibilities. And the bigger it gets, if I'm 100% responsible, I hate it and want out. I'm a 0 to 50 million, 0 to 75 million guy. After that, it's too much pain for me. It's just all administration and no fun. And in the times, where we go beyond that, if I'm not the operational responsible party, then I can write a little longer, but it's not nearly as fun, and I don't spend nearly as much time on it. So I'm definitely a startup person, and I know people who, like, they don't have the ideas, they don't know where to begin, but they're really good managers at the 50 to $100 million level. They can take that thing, and 10x it easily.
Fantastic. Fantastic. I mean, interesting position. Like there's there's that kind of, I mean, there's obviously like things that are VC backed and they have a board and they have kind of people that you're accountable for. But I think what you're starting to talk about is like the space where it's like, do we IPO? And then you've got a whole nother, is that the turning point, or you're saying even before that? It's just a big
I would
operation.
say for me, it's before. So if you think about companies, there's kind of the startup mode. Let's say, just say 0 to 50 million is kind of, for me, that's a startup. The first time I ever raised money through kind of private equity VC concepts, we were already at $48 million a year, right? And so we kind of had our pick of deals, and we raised money at an 88 times valuation, right? So this is not a question of, you know, a lot of people, especially in the Amazon seller space, they get twisted up about hearing 2x, 3x, all kinds of PE ratios. And it's like, each business is built a certain way. If you're building on a mold, then maybe that formula applies. But if you're building outside that mold, maybe it doesn't. So the point is, for me, 0 to 50 million, then you really do want to put some additional growth capital in there. Maybe you need some capital to start the business, right? That's a perfect reason to put money in earlier. But then you kind of have the building round, where it's, then you go from 50 to 250 or 500 million. Then you do your mezzanine. Then you go public. But I hate all administration. I'm the worst detail guy. I despise it. In fact, if somebody said you either retire or do detail work forever, I'm like, all right, fine. I'll just sit on the beach and do nothing, right? But I'll be miserable, but I'll be slightly less miserable than if I was doing admin and HR and, stupid meetings about, the next regulation that is just in my way and just beating me down. So it is hard and it's visceral. I don't like it.
No. I not only can I tell, I can relate so deeply. With my team, I've got a rule now: don't send me anything that's a contract over the wall. You can have a 15-minute meeting with me. That's it. You explain it, and I'll walk you through it. I am not interested in looking through a 28-page contract on something that I could give two shits about. Honestly, like. Yeah. Are we here to make impact? Are we here to help each other? Are we here to, great. I'm going to trust my people to do their due diligence. We have, fortunately, someone who's responsible for our contracts.
Well, and again, that's part of the value of growth and having a team, because some people love to do that stuff. They love to get in there and figure out the weeds and protect the company and this and that. I'm just not that person. And I have a war on email, right? Our systems are designed to have email act as notifications, but not actions. The actions come inside the system, tasks or responsibilities. And email is the worst form, and it's absolutely a non-form of delegation, right? But a lot of entrepreneurs email somebody who works for them and says, hey, I had this idea. Can you go do this? And they think that they've properly delegated the job. And it's not going to work like that at scale, for sure. Sometimes you'll find those things work out and you'll give yourself a false sense of security, but it's really not the right way to do anything on a long-term systemic way across a broader organization.
Yeah, sound advice and a great insight, because I'm sitting here and I'm listening to kind of where you're at, and honestly, if I'm honest with myself here, I'm like, shit, you are living my dream reality right now, where you get to kind of come in and not get too entrenched in it, and I've got to earn that, and there's many more years to come before I get to sit there. But surely there was a moment in time where, for most people, most entrepreneurs, and I would say I'm sort of going through it now on a personal level, it's like, how do I get to that position where I can achieve more, have more impact, and be less involved in daily operations? If there's any advice or any insights you can share on maybe your journey on what that looked like for you and how you sit to where you sit today, where you really get to dictate, your own reality for many for most to see.
Yeah. So in full disclosure, when I start a new company and I don't have a bunch of resources, and I still have to do a bunch of work, and I still have to go through and do things that I may not be in love with, but that's a choice that I made to start a new thing, and all the vision is in my brain until I get it out into the people, right? So there is still no full on magic button, but for me, it began with the idea that people actually want to do a good job, right? And the system, in fact, can be the underpinning of measurement, which leads to accountability. And as you outline, hey, this is your responsibility. Here's the types of things we've given people unreasonable responsibilities at times, but we always say, help us measure it. I remember when we started a mid-sized Philippine operation, years ago, 24/7, we had over, I don't know, 120 people in Makati. We said to my brother, hey, you run the claims and fulfillment department. We don't have any measurements for that. So come up with some measurements and get back to us, right? And sales is easy to measure, and marketing on some levels is easy to measure, right? Because there's all these very clear metrics, but it's like, no, go measure things that happen after the sale that have what we perceive as no real financial benefit. But they came back with a whole series of measurements about, how many claims that they saved, and that was a financial add back, and what was the length of time it took them to respond to claims. All of these kinds of metrics way before any of this stuff was kind of readily available. And
I thought you were going to say sexy.
No, well, that they did it sexy. It's certainly before the idea of minutes to response was a well-known thing, and yes, sexy in a way of metrics being sexy. Yeah, only nerds like you and I think, oh, look at that dashboard. Oh, slow down, right? It's yeah. Sorry, everybody, I just took a turn. But the point kind of is, when I gave up the reality that I don't know all the answers, and just said, here's the problem, can you guys give me a solution? That's when things got easier, right? I don't have to know everything. And this, I see a common problem with entrepreneurs, especially Amazon sellers. They feel like they have to learn everything front to back before they can then teach someone. And they move this bottleneck concept from them to someone else. And then they just keep burning through that someone else, expecting this magic unicorn. Why would somebody else care about the business the way you do? They don't own it, right? You have to break it down into, this is feasible, I can do this, and they can be recognized and rewarded for doing that, instead of just assuming they're going to be like you. So that recognition of, I don't know all the answers, I can trust them to come up with the solutions. And why in the world would I expect them to work as hard as I do when they don't have all their guts into it, or the upside, the downside, etc.? It's not reasonable.
Yeah. That's it. I mean, that's the what is measured can be, I've forgotten the quote. I've ruined it.
Yeah, all right, we'll just go to edit code B. What gets measured gets managed, right?
Yes.
So
there you go.
That's the way to think about it. Yeah, that's what Yoni taught me earlier, and so I'm just repeating it.
Jeez, the ultimate save there, Steve. I appreciate it. So we've talked a lot about kind of the direction, and again, it's coming really clear to me, like, what are the fundamental things that you put into play to get people on board on this mission and drive forward as a uniform team? And it's very cool to seeing how many times you've done it over and kind of the approach that you take. But if I had to ask you the converse of, what are some of the biggest mess ups that have happened for you, and some of the biggest mistakes you made that you had big learnings from? What do you got? What do you got up your sleeve?
Oh, good Lord. Where to start? It almost feels like these outweigh the others, believe me. So I can tell you one time, that same Makati organization, our COO went over there and could just tell there was something not right. And what had happened, very briefly, is we were doing an email migration, and then one of the IT people decided that they, instead of just migrating and being security conscious, they would just read the manager's emails. And then they started sending some of those emails. It created a terribly toxic environment, and we fired half the people as a result of that. So some people who were kind of breaking into other people's emails, so that's a violation of trust we just cannot tolerate. And other people who knew about it who didn't step forward and call it out, that's also a violation of trust. So, as much as we tried to build that organization in a smart way, we found that to be a problem later, and basically some people were fired and other people were paid to go away because of the toxic environment that was created. So it's not all rainbows and unicorns, right? It takes time and energy. And in this world, we have to be very security conscious. Right now, we will have security and roles and permissions and things like that managed between different people who are not necessarily super close, right? Where the I don't know, soap opera drama for somebody in India, they don't care about what's happening in the Philippines or in the U.S. or whatever. They're like, hey, I just need to get this thing done before the end of the day, and they don't have time to go through and screw up. And now the securities and things are better. When you migrate things, you're automatically, the users are forced to change their password. So there's learnings along the way, but that's just one example. There's another company that we bought. By the way, we originally offered them $12 million to buy their company. They said no. And then a year later, we said, all right, we'll now buy you for $6 million. And they said yes. And we said, oh, by the way, we're only paying half in cash and the other half in our stock. And they still said yes. Even though they were growing, they could see that we were going to crush them. So it was kind of the easy way or hard way. However, so that's the good part of the story. Once we bought them, we were too arrogant to understand and cherish what was special about their company. And they were doing around $1 million a month at the time. And basically, over the course of 2 years, by smashing them into our system and genericizing some of their unique things, we took their specialness away and ultimately ended up just shutting down that company after, maybe 4 years. Now, I still got my value out of it. There were some financial equations that still worked for me, but it would have been a lot better to have a company that was still worth money after 4 years than trying to squeeze out my 6 million along the way. So that was my arrogance, thinking my systems are perfect, better. And they, from a functional standpoint, there's no question they were. But from that specialness, that uniqueness, it's kind of like you took away the cool little coffee shop and you just, went right over it with a steamroller, put a Starbucks up. And that's that we did that. And that was a problem.
What actually happened? As in, like, what was, you've gone, you've rolled in your systems, but what was it that was lost?
Well, they had their own website on their own kind of servers that had their own kind of checkout mechanisms and their own kind of customer interface mechanisms. And we just felt ours were better. And so we steamrolled that. And within 60 days, they were running on our site, and it took away some of the special little nuances of how they operated. We also took away their customer service department, which is only a few people. And actually, we moved one or two of them up to Seattle, but we're like, they don't need to operate in California. They can operate in Seattle. But again, whatever they were doing, we should have studied a little more closely, and we should have preserved and then tried to, if you ever see the guys who move the big trees, they now have these big machines that go under the root ball and bring out the tree carefully. We just kind of chopped off the tree and jammed it in the ground up in Seattle, and we're like, oh, that thing did not grow the way we expected. And that was arrogance. And by the way, the PPE business, arrogance. I knew it would be like a fidget spinner.
Sorry, I brought it up.
Well, no, this is an outrage. No, I have no problem talking about it. The truth is, we will lose 7 figures because of our arrogance. So even though I've learned that lesson over time, I still relearn stuff today. So anybody who thinks that, oh, Steve's got it all figured out, I have experience and I am better than average, but we still learn stuff all the time. Well, do you need more failures, Johnny? I'm just kidding. I don't mind talking about it.
I want to have you back here, so I better not push too hard into those areas. No, but honestly, like, just listening to those learnings, they're such fundamental learnings that, like, I can honestly say as well, I've made a million mistakes, right? We all have, but even like early on in this business, we were delivering SEO at the start because it was a real low hanging fruit. We picked up someone, he ran an agency of 50 people, simplest thing ever. I had 10 years of creative advertising, digital marketing under my belt. I ran it. It didn't get the same level of love that the rest of the business got. And as a result, we ended up handing it over to one of our clients who wanted to build an SEO agency as part of their PPC agency. And it was a better fit. It was the better service delivery. But I tried to take a shortcut. I thought, you know what? Great opportunity. Let's do it. I ended up wasting so much of my time and mostly just my energy trying to deal with one difficult person who thought that, whose ego wouldn't fit into the Zoom screen. So, that's definitely like a fundamental learning that it's not that easy, and, making calculated decisions, and, the ego is always going to be our enemy here.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. I have on that PPE business, by the way, it's funny because I remember the first contact I had with one of my partners in that series of businesses. And I'm like, no way, this is a fidget spinner. Be careful, right? I warned him. And then another one of the partners in the group, they're like, hey, can you get this stuff? Because, man, if we had this stuff, we could sell. I'm like, I don't want to touch that stuff. It's too complicated. It's too, I gave all the reasons. And 2 weeks later, I'm like, yeah, I can do it because of this and that and the other. And we definitely had some wins early on. But the scale of what we built and what is now a non-market is huge. And I knew that was my instincts were that was what was going to happen. But I got excited and again, arrogant, right? Oh no, even though this reality might exist, here's the rationale that I can talk myself through. And if anybody's ever heard Elon Musk talk about this, the enemy is you talking yourself into stuff. You can rationalize almost anything. And it's better to just go, you know what? I'm kind of busy already. Let me just carry on with what I'm really good at or passionate about or focused on. And that's a good lesson for all entrepreneurs, right? That's, I have no problem learning lessons. I don't like it when they cost me a lot of money, but it's the nature of the beast.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess, you have enough of those successes in life, and you can look to solve bigger problems or take on bigger risks. And it's not as impactful. Whereas like someone who's on more at the starting end of their entrepreneurial journey, like, I couldn't afford to take a hit like that right now, because I wouldn't say I'm emotionally invested in the businesses. I see it the way you see it. It's a vehicle to enable the creation of a lot of jobs. And that's really the driving, the guiding light for me. But yeah, it's a blow to the ego, especially early on. And yeah, focus. Like you said, it's all about focus.
Yeah, but I can tell you just on the topic of, failure, which is inevitable on some level, right? There's usually a small series of fails equate to a good outcome. The big fails, can be more problematic. Another episode, we'll talk about the day I lost $60 million, since you seem to be into this. The point is, nobody cares about your failure as much as you do, right? The embarrassment or the, I'm not perfect or any of that, it's all up in your head. Nobody actually cares nearly as much as you do. Nobody in a year, nobody will remember I was in the PPE business, right? Nobody will, there's just no negative repercussions. But in our mind, again, part of the ego, we're like, oh, I can't make any mistakes or else, right? And it's like, who cares? Nobody actually cares except you. And that's just a truth.
It's so true. I'm just sitting here thinking of like all the things that I get so, focused on and worked up on, and, it's gone literally in a few weeks, it's gone. And I'm the only one who's really remembering it. Most people are, it was like a passing conversation that they had with you one time. So yeah, absolutely. But, I got to tell you, Steve, I've like I said, I've done 20 odd episodes now, and, I really haven't asked that many people about their failures. The only reason why I wanted to ask you is because I feel like, just in terms of your experience and how real you are, you're going to give some great insights and great learning. So I don't love to talk about it. I'm singling you out, and I'm a really bad
I can tell you, this is really uncomfortable for you. Yeah, I can see that. But listen, none of that matters. I live in Instagram land. Instagram is just pictures of pretty stuff and pretty people doing pretty things. And they now, our young people, Gen Z, think, oh, that's what life is. But I'm here to tell you that is not what life is. Life is much more about failure than it is about all the pretty pictures. That doesn't mean life's bad, right? And I don't love it when things aren't going well, just to be clear. There's plenty of times where I don't feel great if things suck, right? Especially, in present day, right? As it's happening, it doesn't feel good. But that doesn't mean that I stay there forever, right? It's like, all right, I always say to myself and my team for that matter, my family, if you're not going to remember this exact moment in 10 years, why bother with it now? Right? There's some things we will remember that are worth, right? Serious family issues or health issues or this or that. There's some things that, deserve their moment. But there's other things that's like, you know what? In 10 years, we're not even going to remember this moment or emotion or whatever. So why overinvest now on it? And that just helps me stay focused on what's important now and going forward.
It's a hard hitting point there. Yeah, that's I love that. I just sat here in deep thought thinking about shit, like all the stuff that keeps me up at night. How important is it really? Like being that little bit more present in the moment, but not holding on to it, I think would do probably a lot of people a lot of good.
Yeah, I can also say that so first of all, entrepreneurs in general have very good guts and very good instincts. There are times where you have to, trust data more than instinct and validate your instinct with the data and so forth. But there are things that when your gut is non over and over, that you need to pay attention to that, right? And there's actually two parts of your brain. One is the nonverbal side. That's the side that thinks, right? And if it can't communicate, that's that uneasy feeling that you got on the other side. The verbal side just can't put it into words. There's no articulation possible. And so when that's happening, I would really try to dive into what it is until that feeling goes away, right? And that could mean, well, I'm worried about this person. Go have a conversation with that person. Just figure it out. And by the way, if the worst comes to pass and that person, leaves the company or whatever happens, at least you got it over with, right? And so often I tell people, they're like, oh, well, this happened, and then, gosh, the whole thing blew up. But I'm like, good thing it happened now.
Yep.
Right? Don't delay it. Don't put off the inevitable. And I can tell you from all the learnings and the failures, doing things in a decisive manner is better 9 times out of 10.
It's funny, like at this point, I usually ask people, like, if you've got any words of advice that you want to give to people who are aspiring entrepreneurs or on that journey right now. I feel like you've just given so many great nuggets here. It's not fair to put you on the spot before I let you go, but anything else you got hiding up that sleeve?
Well, I would say, just from a philosophical level, it's just like, if you are driven to be an entrepreneur, in other words, it's for you, the choice of not being an entrepreneur is not a choice, right? You want more than you can to be an entrepreneur than anything else, then you have to do it. And you just have to figure out how to, develop your skills and so forth. Everybody's good at a few things. My number one learning is I build the team around me. I am not a well-rounded individual, nor do I wish to be. I'm not good at a bunch of things, so I bring in people around me that are good at those things. And turns out they actually like those things, which I don't even understand. So they like the things I hate. A well-rounded team is what makes the magic, not keeping all the money for myself or trying to figure out how to covet every second and every penny. I've just see a lot of entrepreneurs like, well, if I hire somebody, then I have to pay them, or if I train them, that costs me a bunch of money. What if they leave? And my answer on that is, well, if you don't train them and they stay, then what do you got, right? What a terrible outcome that is. So just, if you're an entrepreneur, follow your guts, work through whatever you got to. And at the end of the day, just know that the journey that's the secret. Enjoy the bloody journey, right? It's not the destination. As a guy who's 50 years old and have been around, the journey is the part that you got to enjoy. And, and just remember, it's the ups and downs that are, make the ups that much better.
Yeah, I literally, I'm sitting here the whole time talking to you, just thinking about all these moments, right, that happened throughout the journey. And there's a lot of terrible times, and you celebrate the wins. But I think, like you said, having the team around you and knowing that, you're not going it alone. So you might be an entrepreneur and you might want to solve a million problems and go bigger and the next one and again. But I think that at the end of the day, having that team around you, whatever that dynamic looks like, whether they're partners or employees or team members, as I like to refer to them as, like, it doesn't, that's what makes it worth it.
Yeah. And it's what makes it possible too, right? The strategy comes first, then systems, then scale, and scale is a code for people. Everybody who thinks that they can do it automated and they can do it without people and all that, great, cool. And whatever business you build, more power to you. But I've seen it time and time again. People are the ultimate secret, and getting that right is not easy. I am a terrible manager, but I'm trying to get better.
Well, it's all part of the journey. Steve, thanks so much for coming on. It's been super illuminating for me, and hopefully those listening are enjoying it as much as I am. If anyone wanted to get in touch with you, what would be the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I would they can go to listen to the awesomers.com podcast. I don't do a lot of interaction on a one-to-one basis because my schedule is kind of a nutty thing at times. But, the awesomers.com podcast, I have a couple hundred hours of my thoughts on various topics. And if they like what they hear here, or they don't, they can go listen to that and confirm their bias.
Awesome. Well, again, thanks so much. It's been a lot of fun, and just appreciate your time.
Yeah, happy to be here. Thanks, Johnny.